Hey everybody, welcome to Grimm's Forge Gaming. This is Grimm here. I'd like to show you my Spartan build. I've been doing BGs and no CP Cyrodiil with it. I also spent a lot of time down in Imperial City in the sewers and districts. So let's jump right into the build here. Armor-wise, we're wearing the Valkynscoria set. I like this. It helps with additional bursts, and then there's some splash damage from it. And then your one-piece bonus with the additional health is always nice. And the next set we're running with is New Moon Acolyte. I was a little worried about the increased costs of your active abilities, the 5% at the bottom. As it turns out, it didn't really affect this build all that much. I was able to offset that with other things, and so this ended up being a great set. We are running 2 heavy and then 5 light. The second set that we are running is Amberplasm. I was running Overwhelming Surge on my weapons and stuff as that second set instead of Amberplasm, and Overwhelming Surge was a really nice set as well until a friend of mine said, hey, why don't you check out Amberplasm? And we dueled a couple times, and his sustain, his burst, and everything was just right where I wanted to be. And so I started throwing the Amberplasm together, and I love it. I love it. That said, now when Overwhelming Surge procs, it's kind of misleading. It's not misleading, it's understated, but it says like 15% of the total damage that's done is returned to you in Magicka, and it's an AoE lightning field around you. And if you have a lot of enemies around you, mobs or whatever, you'll actually, while you're spamming sweeps, you'll see your Magicka increase during that time frame. It's pretty cool. I can run that set, and Overwhelming Surge will sustain me, but I'm really liking Amberplasm. You need the stamina recovery, dodge rolling, blocking, and the magic recovery, spell damage, and everything. This set really complements New Moon Acolyte for sure. And on my weapon, I am running a lightning staff, and we're running it with Nirnhone for the most damage that we can get. The reason I decided to go lightning staff for this damage build is this right here. Let's see. Um, Lightning Staff. Equipping a Lightning Staff increases your damage done with area of effect abilities by 8%. And so your puncturing sweeps is an area of effect. It's also considered direct damage. So you can actually get kind of a double bonus there by bumping up in your CP your Master at Arms. You're increasing your direct damage done. And by using a Lightning Staff, you're also increasing your um, area of effect damage. So I definitely noticed that a lot. And on my back bar, we are using Resto staff. So jumping into the abilities, we're not buffed up right now, but my main attack bar is this, and I rarely change this out. Um, Toppling charge, this is my hard CC, and they changed it now to where you can use toppling charge from like melee range if you're right on top of them. So basically count to 5 and cast it again. So that way you can maintain that CC on them and kind of control the fight. If you're not CCing them, they're CCing you. So toppling charge, my hard CC. Puncturing sweeps. Puncturing sweeps is your spammable, and it is also kind of my soft CC, or my tether or my root. So it slows them by 40%, which definitely helps keep them in front of me. It's very hard for them to get away from that once we get them locked in. Purifying Light, this is how you're going to put a lot of damage into people really quickly. One of the best things to do is if you have Crescent Sweep available, which is super low ultimate. Doesn't have a super high tooltip on it, but that doesn't matter. The fact of the matter is, even unbuffed, this is 8,500 damage, and if I put Purifying Light on them and toppling charge into them and then hit them with a crescent sweep, that just those abilities, gap closing to them with purifying light on them and hit them with my ultimate, that's a lot of damage. So I like that combo a lot. And the friend of mine that was showing me about Amberplasm, he was running Purifying Light rather than I was actually running Dark Flare because I wanted to apply the major defile. And we're obviously in a very tanky meta, or everyone's got the ability. A lot of classes have the ability to throw out major heals or self heal, and so I felt like Dark Flare was the way to go to kind of combat that. But um, dueling my friend and working with him, really, this isn't the answer. The answer is just amplify your damage and put the damage into them, put the burst into them, and just go. And make it too stressful for them to keep up with it. And aside from that, another thing about it is you don't want fights to go long. You want to get them down, burn them down, and move on to the next as quick as possible. You never know when it goes from a 1v1 to a 1vx situation, and you got to move on to the next. And so Purifying Light was definitely the way to go. I like Purifying Light too because of that additional heal that we have. So we're stacking heals. We're getting 44% of the damage from puncturing sweeps is healing me. Purifying Light is healing me. And then on our back bar, I run Ritual Retribution, which is going to heal me as well. And it's a little dot on them. But anyways, Elemental Drain, because I'm using the Lightning Staff, Elemental Drain's the play for sure. Applies Major Breach, so that way I'm doing more damage to the target, and it applies Minor Magicka Steel, which is great for me. The Amberplasm set has great sustain. Elemental Drain just um, helps amplify that, so I can get in extended fights and not have big problems with this build. No CPs, no problem with this build. I feel very strong. I was just out in Cyrodiil yesterday. We're doing the mid-year midsummer PvP event, and we were in an outnumbered situations multiple times, and it was not the times that I died to the Zergs and stuff like that, or the large groups. It was not because I was out of resources. It was just because of the amount of burst damage and getting focused. So I like that. I don't want to die because I have no resources. Something's not working in that case, or you just push the throttle down too long, too hard, and um, didn't account for recovery or regen. Channeled acceleration. Templars are known for being slow, and I like that channeled acceleration. That gives me the speed I want, and also gives me additional crit damage. So um, I love that. And the cost on it isn't very high. I'm not worried about the cast time, but the duration is really nice. So 36 seconds. Before I engage on somebody, before I hit toppling charge or anything else, I want to make sure channeled acceleration is up, so that way I can dance around them. That movement speed buff does not drop when you engage, and so that's important to know. So I have movement speed during the fight. I can dance around them. If they try and run or move, I can keep up with them no problem, especially because puncturing sweeps is applying that slow as well. So I'm applying the slow to him, plus I'm moving faster. Probably not going to get away. That's going to force him to stand and fight. And so that's just a good combination. Let's debuff them, and let's amp up our damage, and then let's CC them, and let's go. And of course we're using Crescent Sweep, lower tool tip, but it's a lower cost and it's a lot of damage. Not buffed right now. We'll buff up and look at these again here real quick after we go through these abilities. Degeneration's my buff. Make sure you run with Degeneration as a Magicka Templar for your buff, unless you're running Rattle Cage or something like that, because you need that major sorcery buff. So make sure you have that. I've actually talked to 4 or 5 Templars recently, newer players and stuff like that, but they don't realize that they're missing this buff, and it'll increase their damage output by 20%. It's pretty significant. And I get this degeneration, you get the magic over time, the dot from it. That's great. Helps proc scoria. So I'm running Breath of Life on here. I've seen some really big crit heals from this, and this is my primary spammable heal for myself and others. The cost is pretty high. I try not to spam it, I guess, so I hate to call it a spammable, but there are times where we're spamming it. So Living Dark right now is really impressive ability. I hope they don't nerf it. Um, Especially with the two-hand ults and stuff like that in the game. This helps a little bit. Um, Berserker Strike and Onslaught is just so powerful right now, and even for a Magicka Templar, speaking of that, you could run a two-hander, and there's a passive in the two-hander ability that will increase after a heavy attack. Follow up. When you deal damage with a fully charged heavy attack, your next direct damage attack used within 7 seconds deals an additional 5%. And you can put 2 points into it, so now you get 10% damage bonus. So if you hit somebody with a two-hand heavy attack and then hit them with your crescent sweep, you're going to get 10% more damage from it. For me, I didn't think it was a good enough trade-off to losing the bonuses of the lightning staff, and additionally another perk from the lightning staff when you're comparing those two for me and my play style was if you do run out of juice, you run out of magicka completely, as long as I did my rotation properly and they have magicka or they have elemental drain on them, I can just hold heavy attack with the lightning staff and get magicka back. I'm still applying pressure to the target and multiple targets, people standing around them. It's not a lot of pressure, but it's something. It's offsetting some of their hots and things like that. Um, and so I was really liking the lightning staff for sure. Going back to the back bar, Living Dark though, it's a great ability. Anytime an enemy uses direct damage attack against you, the sphere lashes back, reducing their movement speed by 60%. Great. Means I can probably outrun them. Um, you know, Create some distance, and let's try and reset the fight, and then decide if we want to re-engage and kind of turn the fight in our favor, or if we just need to evade. And you get some heals from it. I like using Ritual Retribution, and applies a little bit of damage. Basically, when I build my house, my Templar house, like this is where we're going to stand, this is where we're going to fight, like the song in the video, Channeled Focus and Ritual of Retribution is my house. And then I'll throw on Living Dark. And basically, I'm just going to stand and fight in that area, and we're going to do as much damage as we can. I like our chances in that area, especially 1v1. And this heal is very underrated. So I'll see 4K ticks and 5K ticks from this when it crits, and that's pretty impressive of a heal that you just throw it down and forget about it and go. So I like that. Channeled Focus, really low cost, but this is our major resolve and gives us our armor buff. And while standing in your rune, increases your resistance, your physical and spell resistance granted by 50%. I'm over cap when I stand in this on my tank builds easily. I'm in that 5 armor, light armor, 2 heavy right now, and so let's look at everything when we're buffed up. Right, on our Resto bar, we are in light armor 31 and 26. I need to transmute a couple of the things. I'd like to get 15 to 2000 on this. And let me apply something here again real quick. So, when we look at these abilities now, puncturing sweeps hits better, 9300 on our crescent. Spell damage is 3300. We could get another 400 spell damage on this build if I went with a different enchant on my Resto staff. But I'm running the Resto staff one that returns Magicka, And but for a light armor build, I like our resistances. I like where we're at. Our crit resistance will get better on this build. I've been running around with it and not getting blown up too bad. In a one-on-one situation, it hasn't been too bad, or 1v4, 1v5. It hasn't been bad at all. Obviously, anybody can get Zerg down, and there are some players out there running around with 7k weapon damage, so they drop an onslaught or berserker strike on you. It doesn't matter the amount of crit resistance you have, you're still going to get blown up. So there's that. But for a light armor build, I really like where we're at. Buffing up again. Yeah, so 3,300 spell damage, that's nice. Our spell crit, it could be higher, but I see a lot of crits when I'm going. Our max magicka is low, but it hasn't really been an issue. I noticed that on magic recovery, our 1600 to 1700 magic resistance range is about the range where you can spam sweeps safely and not just juice, run out of juice, run out of magicka, trying to burst people down. So as long as you're at 16 to 1700 or higher in your magic recovery, you can do work. Um, I like where my health is at right now out of Cyrodiil, or out of the Imperial City. Um, 23,000 health, and we could add another 5,000. You add another 5,000 health, so we're at 28,000 health in PvP. That's good. That's 26 to 30, I think, is where you want to be right now. So you're not onslaught or berserked, one-shotted without an execute follow-up, into oblivion. But um, I definitely like that. I'm not running any shields other than that Living Dark on this build, um, and I've had a lot of success. Going into the champion points. So let's start over here. We're going to look at the apprentice. 60 into blessed. So our puncturing sweeps heal us, and so why not allow them to heal more, or the amount of heals I'm going to be throwing out to people. So I feel like bless is the play there. Elfborn, I'd like to do critical damage and critical heals 20% more, 21% more, so 60. Also, talking about 60, I see some people, especially recently, that are putting like 100 points into these. Diminishing returns or diminishing gains is a thing, and if you look at the amount of points that you'll spend from 60 just to get this from 60 to 100, you will lose this spread. You will not be able to put these points into here or anywhere else in this tree if you try and drop 100 into here. Um, that, but also to get from um, 60 to 100 in blessed, I think that might take my healing done up to 15%. So would I spend 40 more points just to get 3, 4, 5 more percent? No. I'd rather put the 40 over here, Elemental Expert, or 40 in a spell erosion. It's better spent somewhere else. So for me, a soft cap. There are some builds that I run that I do push the limits, and I'll do things, but I'll do more than 60. But generally speaking, 60 is where I like to be, and I don't notice a big decrease in damage or playability or anything like that from 60 to 100. Um, so, anyways, 60 into Elfborn, 40 into Elemental Expert. Spell Erosion, we definitely want that penetration, especially with the tanky targets right now. Staff Expert, we are doing a light attack, heavy attack weave. This was basically a dump. And Master at Arms, our puncturing sweeps is now considered direct damage, which is great. They kind of defined it. Before, it was like this hybrid thing in between. It had a direct damage component to it, and then a damage over time component to it. It was really strange. So nothing into the ritual. Um, Going over here, Ironclad 60. This is important for your CP. Make sure you put 60 or better into Ironclad. All of the direct damage attacks in the game, the abilities that are going to 100% of your health, you kill you are usually direct damage attacks, and so you definitely want points in Ironclad. I have 60 points in spell resistance. That's why my Templars get a spell resistance bonus as well. And um, so I'm just trying to make my guy who is wearing 5 heavy, 2 light as tanky as possible and as bursty as possible. Isn't that the goal? So nothing into resistance. Haven't really had a problem because of the healing right now. Like I said, I am switching on my armor. Those armor pieces will be transmuted to impen. So that way we're at about the 15 to 2k impen. Light armor focus. I like that physical resistance. When I'm attacking somebody, they're usually in melee range or physical range, and we don't want to get blown up too fast. So there's that. Nothing in a hardy or elemental defender. I actually made the switch to real heavy in these and real heavy in the focus, whether it be light armor or heavy armor, with any of my builds. And I noticed that my flat stats, my physical and spell resistance increased. Um, and for me, that's what I wanted. I wanted actually the hard physical and spell resistance stats to increase, and so I ended up not putting anything into those. I haven't noticed it, so try it out and see for yourself. Quick recovery for healing received. I think this is important. If I'm healing myself, which is a Magicka Templar, you do a lot. Heavy armor focus, we've got 40 into that, and Warlord 60, we are going to get CC'd and we are going to have to break free. Mooncalf, I've got 50. Um, I could probably run a little less in Mooncalf, but for me this has worked out really well. When I do dodge roll or I do block, I need that stamina back, so um, this has worked out really well. Arcanist, we need that additional Magicka recovery for sure. Tenacity, if I were to remove anything from Mooncalf, I'd put it more into Tenacity. It would help with my sustain. Not that I have sustain issues at all, so boom, it's there. All right. So I am a vampire, and there are times where I'll sneak around to kind of pick and choose my fight, or if we're going to be pinched or we want to flank somebody, obviously moving around, I want to be in stealth, and so I don't want to burn my stamina trying to get into position before the fight happens, and so that's important. Tumbling for the times I do. Dodge roll for me as a Magicka Templar, I'd rather be dodge rolling rather than blocking, because we don't have a lot of block casting abilities. Like if you're a Magicka DK, you can actually whip them and lash them and everything. A lot of your abilities can be block cast. In Magicka Templar, you're channeling, you're puncturing sweeps and things. So tumbling was the play for me. Worked out really well. That's a CP here, and let's look at a couple other things here. Light armor, focus. I've got 5 light armor, and you want to make sure you have all those passives there. Obviously, with your Destro staff, make sure you have all the passives there, and Resto have all the passives there. And oh, that reminds me, Light's Champion was the ultimate there. You can use the other morph too, as long as you have the proper things picked out that you want, and that's pretty powerful. This has worked really well for me, applying Major Force to our team, basically a little steroid. If I'm using this, it's a trouble point for our team or myself, and this is basically kind of like a berserk, let's go, see if we can turn the fight around, and I like that. Heavy armor, you're only going to need these 3. I switch this guy back and forth between heavy armor tank build also, so I have all those passives. And vampire, super important. Make sure you get all the passives. I'm interested to see how the next patch, how vampire shapes out. That'll be fun. Another thing that you can do is, if I were to drop this and say we're jumping into large groups, I would put Devouring Swarm on there. It's just an additional, it's damage and it's an additional heal coming in. It allows me to kind of swim in Zergs for a short while and do the most amount of damage. And there is like a Bombplar build that I'll show you guys at another point. That if I'm running around in the Imperial City or the districts and I'm finding out there's a lot of groups there, we'll do that. We'll definitely do the Bombplar. Anyways, channeled acceleration took the place of elusive mist. You can't really beat the 75% damage mitigation on elusive mist, and so if I'm taking a lot of damage and moving around the field, I'll throw that in. But to be honest, channeled acceleration for just a movement speed purposes is the play. It's a cheaper cost, and you get some damage perks with it, whereas this is damage mitigation, higher cost, and you lose all of your magic regen and heals coming in while you're in elusive mist. So this is a more defensive for sure play. Fighter ability, I like Banish the Wicked. I'm in Imperial City a lot, and so we'll do that. Psijic Order. So the Psijic Order, I have all the passives here, so you get that nice damage shield, a 5k damage shield. That's great. Let's do that. Undaunted, I've got both of these, but I'm only running, 2 heavy, 5 light, so um, anyways, we have all of these. Procs dead. There's part of your Bombplar build. And I am a Nord, and I'm really liking Nord right now. High health, cold resistance. Max stam, that's great. I need some stam. The ultimate generation when I'm taking damage is great too. And then rugged. You're going to have physical and spell resistance. Almost 4k. You can't beat that. That's what allows me to run a light armor build and have medium armor to heavy armor type resistances. There are people running around with heavy armor that have less resistances than I do, so I don't feel too bad about that. Anyways, that's the build, everyone. Let's talk about food and potions, things like that. So I like to run the Essence of Detection. Stealth detection's pretty important. Major sorcery, that's great. I have that buff, but it helps with the upkeep. And Essence of Immovability, those are my primary potions I use. I like the knockback, so if I'm swimming in Zergs and we're doing the Bombplar build, or we're running this build and we're just gonna let's get in there and let's go. I'll hit this beforehand as a preemptive, at least for the next 10 seconds. So I got 10 seconds to do as much as I can before we assess the situation. Um, and so I'll do that. Probably don't need the stealth detect on top of the immovability because of the way I use this, but we threw it on there. Stealth detect is really nice if you're running light armor, whether it be a sorcerer, anything really. Stealth detect is really nice for those pesky night blades and other sneaky classes that are using vanishing potions and nuking people. So that's build, everybody. And our food is the Bewitched Sugar Skulls. We're running those max stats. If it weren't for that, we wouldn't be able to even get our max magicka to 28,000, and so we kind of need that. So thank you, and look forward to turning out more videos.